pleased to be here today, and we're eager to hear from you, your questions and comments regarding medical device regulation. In 2010, we adopted 4 strategic priorities to fully implement a total life cycle approach, to enhance communication and transparency, to strengthen our workforce and workplace, and to facilitate innovation and address unmet public health needs. We committed to achieve 114 actions by the end of 2010, and in fact, we accomplished 104 of them, 91%, and then I've finished up on the others since that time. Over the past year, the Center has worked to make changes to reinforce our balanced public health approach of fostering medical device innovation while assuring safety and effectiveness. This approach is the cornerstone of our operations, and it governs the decisions we make each and every day. Achieving this balance can be difficult, and part of achieving this balance has been implementing a smarter approach to device regulation, using our unique vantage point to share much information as we can legally with industry, healthcare professionals, patients, and other parties to solve existing safety problems and help facilitate the development of new technologies and safer, more effective next-generation devices. But we can't achieve this balance alone. We need to listen and we need to collaborate, and that's what today is all about. We crafted our 2011 strategic priorities recognizing that we need to make progress and report results on the significant initiatives we've already undertaken. And therefore, our priorities for this year, which you can find posted on our website, focus much of our efforts on completing or continuing the work we started in 2010. One of the major concerns we heard in our 3 town hall meetings last year was about how well our pre-market review programs were operating and their impact on medical device innovation and on patient safety. In January of this year, we announced an action plan to strengthen our pre-market review programs to provide greater predictability, consistency, and transparency. We are now moving forward to implement that plan by taking 25 actions this year. In February, we announced our innovation initiative to accelerate the development and assessment of breakthrough technologies while strengthening the U.S. research infrastructure for all medical devices. One of our proposals was to establish an innovation pathway, and we talked about this at our March 15th public meeting. And this pathway is available for pioneering technologies. However, if adequately resourced, this would become the new pathway for all or most technologies for which a clinical trial needs to be conducted, particularly those subject to a PMA. Today is the Center's 2nd Town Hall meeting of 2011. First, you will hear from individuals and organizations. Several will talk about potential risks with surgical mesh and dental amalgams, 2 types of devices that we are actively reviewing because of safety concerns. Afterwards, we'll open the floor to anyone who wants to ask a question or make a comment. Let me start by apologizing in advance. Sometimes you may get a response that is not as responsive as you would like it to be. If we are actively reviewing an issue, particularly if we might be developing a policy, our policy, and that is for Washington typically, is not to talk about or provide details. Also, oftentimes we can't talk about when we might come out with an action because there are a number of steps we need to go through that are outside of our control. So I may engage in Washington bureaucratic speak. So I'll apologize in advance, but that's just long-standing policy, and I need to stick by it. The second is we don't generally discuss or answer questions about specific medical devices, particularly if they are under active review or appeal at the agency. And again, that's also out of fairness to those who may, of the company, even if the company raises it. We often don't do it because our responses tend to involve confidential information. So with that, again, let me welcome and thank you for coming today.
So we'll begin with our speakers. Our first speaker today is Gary Havrin with the Florida Medical Manufacturers Coalition.
Good morning. I'm Gary Havrin. I'm the president of a medical device company in St. Petersburg, Florida, and the current chair of the Florida Medical Manufacturers Consortium, which is our statewide trade association of medical device companies here in Florida. And I want to begin by welcoming Dr. Shuren and his team to the great state of Florida. We're very pleased that you are here. And I'd like to preface my remarks by saying that we in industry certainly want a strong, effective, and efficient FDA. We recognize that we're partners in bringing the best care and technology to patients around the country, and look forward to continuing to work with you. Just a few comments briefly about the Florida Medical Manufacturers Consortium. Florida, unknown to many people, is a great secret, but Florida is second only to California in the number of FDA registered medical device manufacturing facilities, and that's a message that we try and get out. We have over 470 companies here in Florida and hundreds more of suppliers to those companies. Our industry has a favorable balance of trade, which is becoming more and more unusual, and our industry pays average wages in excess of $55,000. Also, somewhat unique to Florida is that our industry here is composed of a lot of small companies. 95% of our companies have 50 employees and fewer, and 85% of our companies have 25 employees and fewer. Here to address one of our concerns, and some of those driving factors originate with the FDA. A lot of the others are outside the scope of the FDA. But our biggest concern is that many of our companies are being driven to introduce products overseas, to move their manufacturing overseas, and to lose our manufacturing base here in Florida and the U.S. And we want to do obviously everything we can to stop that trend or to reverse it. So why is this happening? Well, with respect to the FDA, we certainly appreciate the FDA's efforts to improve the pre-market review in targeted areas, but over the past few years, there's been, in the industry's view, just too much uncertainty in how the process is working. The FMC members remain concerned about the lack of predictability, transparency, and sometimes question the reasonableness of the pre-market review process. And as I think you know, there have been a lot of reports in the press and elsewhere that some in the industry feel like some of the systems outside the U.S. are a little more predictable. And just as an anecdote, I was talking with a consultant who's for years done applications, and she said to me over the phone, she said, Gary, she said, you know, I used to think I can go to a client and say, here's exactly what you need, here's exactly how long it's going to take. And she said, lately I'm of the opinion that it's almost like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And so we hope to be able to work with the agency and to get some clarity to that process. And while some, both within the FDA and outside the FDA, have talked about the 510K process in particular as being broken, we will defend both the FDA and our industry in the fact we don't think it's a broken process. And while there may be some opportunities for improvement, it's a case where we certainly don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I just want to make very clear that we're not asking that the bar be lowered in terms of the review of the technologies or new products, but we want to make sure that the reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness and clear guidance remains the key part of that program. And I also want to make very clear that while there are probably a lot of folks getting wealthy right now doing studies blaming the FDA for the problems or supporting the FDA and blaming those in industry for the problem, our position, quite frankly, is that any time spent pointing the finger at one group or another is time wasted, which would much better be spent working together to improve the situation for all those concerned, and most importantly for the patients who are the ultimate consumers of our products. I just want to talk about a couple things, and just specific items that we're not looking for an answer for, but just to mention, and that is that someone managed to go all the way back to 1999 and find what I think was called the redaction regulation, which talked about potentially getting redacted copies ready for FOI submitted with some of the industry documents so that the industry could, in return, get them back from the FDA in a much faster fashion. And perhaps there's an opportunity for a revenue stream for the agency there to pay for that as well. And then we also know that we have a lot of suppliers and contract manufacturers here in Florida, and there was a public document issued a little over a year ago, I think, that talked about potentially removing the exception for contract manufacturers filing facility registrations And I think the comments from industry indicated that industry has no problem with that and would support removing that exemption. But unfortunately, the contact information in the Federal Register is now obsolete, and so in trying to follow up on that, we're kind of hitting a roadblock trying to get to the proper person. And so I bring that up not as a criticism, but there may be other public documents the same way, whereas contacts have changed. Unfortunately, the original Federal Register notice being the primary vehicle for finding the contact kind of leads people to a dead end, and maybe others are smarter or more persistent than I am, but I tend to give up sooner. So with that, I just want to say that certainly I and my industry colleagues are certainly available to help in any way or to answer any questions in any way that the agency deems appropriate. And once again, certainly want to thank you for coming to Florida, and we hope that today's meeting and your trip are both productive and pleasant. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Bernard Wyndham.
I'm the president and research director for DAMS International, which is a patient support organization. I'm a medical researcher and have a background in environmental externalities and health effects of toxic exposures, that kind of thing. Like thousands of others who I'm aware of through my organization, after I became involved in it, when I got mercury poisoned, I gradually became disabled in the early 1990s and was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. I had lots of all kinds of problems, physical problems of all kinds, and lots of tests. And one of my tests found that I was mercury toxic, which surprised me because I was a mercury researcher for a state agency. Though I didn't research dental amalgam, I researched emissions and that kind of thing. And I found the main source of my mercury was dental amalgam, and in researching the literature, I found that was not unusual because it's the #1 source of mercury in most people who have several amalgam fillings, which has been documented by hundreds of thousands of tests by medical labs and also by government agencies. I had my amalgams fillings replaced. I didn't know how to go about doing that, but I started searching around to find people that knew how to do it, and I had them replaced. And over the next 3 years, I had my amalgams and millet crowns that were over amalgam replaced, and also did some detoxification, which I also didn't know anything about much, but found out through my research and talking to people. And I basically recovered from all of my different symptoms. I got to where I was so bad I could hardly walk and couldn't drive, and had to have my daughter drive me a lot. And so anyway, but after getting rid of my amalgam and doing the right things, I basically have recovered, and to where in my 60s I've been playing softball on city league teams with a lot younger players, and likewise basketball even again. So. And I also was told I was going blind, and after doing this, my eyes got so good I don't wear glasses anymore. and this is true of over 60,000 cases. We have over 60,000 cases of people we work with that have similar experience to me. What I want to talk about a little more, though, is that there's never been a time in U.S. history when mercury was not known to be extremely toxic, and when there was evidence that its use in amalgam might be safe. I'm providing references of over 880 pages of articles in dental journals from the 1800s documenting the fact that the dental authorities were aware that mercury was extremely toxic and that amalgam was unstable, and its use caused high mercury exposure and patient harm. And I'm going to actually mention some excerpts from some of the articles of that time. Due to the high toxicity of mercury and the known documented fact that those that have amalgam fillings get significant mercury exposures and commonly experience adverse health effects, those dentists who used mercury in that time were called quacks, after the German word for mercury. By the late 1900s, there were thousands of peer-reviewed studies documenting high mercury exposures from amalgam use and common significant adverse health effects. I use the Medline, National Institute of Health, National Library of Medicine for a lot of my sources of that kind of information, and there are thousands of studies there, which I actually have. I actually reference over 5,000 peer-reviewed studies on my website. The following are excerpts from some of the articles in that 800 and something pages that I mentioned from the 1800s. They say, from its inception, the better class of dental practitioners waged war against its use. The manner in which it was introduced called forth the censure of all who have professional etiquette. Dr. Harris of the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery stated, "It's one of the most objectionable materials for filling teeth that can be employed. At the meetings of the dental societies, the subject was discussed and strong arguments made against its use. They reported that such substances were hurtful to the mouth in all parts, and there were no caries that other sources couldn't be used for filling." The report was unanimously adopted by the societies. In 1845, the Mississippi Valley Association of Dental Surgeons resolved that the use of amalgam was injurious and unprofessional and would not be countenanced by its members. But the age of special interest and economic benefit came about in promoting amalgam fillings, and in spite of all of the record in the knowledge of the dental authorities, amalgam use has become fairly widespread, or in fact very widespread. The Dental Registry of Dentistry in 1872 had the following case from Mercury in a tooth filling. John T. Smith died of salivation caused from mercury in a tooth filling. Dr. Sprague attended the case. 2 other doctors consulted agreed he was suffering from the effects of mercury. It was clear that mercury had caused his death. This is one of many cases cited in the journals of that time. The reasons for the high known exposure to all with several amalgam fillings is due to mercury's unusual properties. It's a gas at room temperature, and it's not stable in any other form. It continuously vaporizes to a gas at any temperature over 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And as temperature increases, the vapor pressure increases and it vaporizes faster. In addition to that, if you put it in an amalgam with other metals, you get a battery effect. And you can actually go down to Radio Shack and pick up a microamp meter and put one probe to the tooth, to the filling, and one to the hard palate, and you can measure that it's pumping mercury and other metals into the body, and it accumulates, according to autopsy studies, to high levels throughout the oral cavity of people who have fillings. And from there, it moves on through capillaries and veins and nerves to all parts of the body, and accumulates in organs to high levels, and later in life causes a lot of problems. As I said, our organization has worked with people who recovered. We have over 60,000 cases of people who've recovered after getting rid of their amalgam fillings. And there are a lot of other cases out there, but our organization alone has documented 60,000 cases of recovery. And several of us in my organization had MS, like me. In addition, due to mercury's properties and the high exposures of those with amalgam fillings, dental amalgam is documented by municipal sewer agencies and the EPA to be the largest source of mercury in sewers and sewer sludge, with very high levels in both. The average person with several such fillings or crowns over amalgam is documented to excrete approximately 30 micrograms per day of mercury into the sewers, a very high level since mercury is the most toxic element people commonly come in contact with. Medical labs found that the average person with amalgams excretes almost 10 times as much mercury as those without amalgams. And you can find that on their own websites, on the web, in a medical lab. An amalgam is a significant source of mercury in water bodies, the environment, fish, and so forth. So in Florida, we have most of our water bodies have warnings for mercury in fish. Well, dental amalgam is the largest source in sewers and a major source in water bodies from sewer outfalls. And there's actually enough coming in to contaminate virtually all the fish in Florida to dangerous levels. And we do have that problem with mercury in fish in Florida. This is true also in other states. And some of the other countries that have actually banned amalgam, the environmental effects of the mercury going into the water bodies in fish is one of the reasons that they cite, and why countries like, well, several countries in Europe have banned amalgam, and other countries, because of the harm to people, have put limits on use in women and children.
Thank you, Dr. Lemon.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Ashlita Rishi. Our next speaker is Charmaine Frederick.
Good morning. I'm a registered nurse. I'm also an affected and concerned citizen. I'm going to talk about mercury amalgams. Over the years, I had many mercury amalgams placed in my mouth, 14 to be exact. And it wasn't really until I read Dr. Jim Hardy's book, Mercury Free, that I was well aware of the issues regarding mercury. Issues such as, excuse me, I have Parkinson's disease, and it has affected my speech, so you have to bear with me, okay? But, you know, as I read Dr. Hardy's book, I was very angry with the dentist, first of all, who over the years put mercury in my teeth and didn't really tell me what the risks were. And then I was kind of mad at the FDA because I thought, you know, this debate has gone on since the 1800s. What are we doing here? You know, you should have banned it a long time ago. I don't really understand why you haven't done this. And thousands of studies have been done regarding this issue, and I don't know why you haven't, you know, believed them. It just doesn't make any sense to me, defies comprehension, that you would look at, you know, trying to look at a normal range for a toxic substance. That doesn't make any sense to me. You know, the other argument that you make is that if you have that if you just take one substance, one chemical, and you look at the emissions of it, it doesn't. You don't look at the cumulative effect of it in the human being. So, you know, it's not just mercury that's involved in my Parkinson's disease, but it's all the other toxins I've been exposed to over my lifetime. And it really creates a toxic stew that really is more than the sum of its parts that you haven't taken into consideration. Just looking at things in isolation. You know, what happened to do no harm, Dr. Shuren? You know, it's very apparent to me that it's time that we let mercury go. You know, when we knew better, when we know better, we do better. And it's your perfect opportunity to make a ban against mercury amalgams. Okay.
Our next speaker is Chris Scarano.
Morning, Jeff. I brought you a gift this morning to thank you for allowing me to speak. Jeff, do you know what George Washington, our first president of the United States, died of? George Washington was legally murdered in 1799 by the finest allopathic doctors of the time. He was given a fatal dose of mercury in hopes of curing his sore throat. You will not find this in our children's history books. It's not even mentioned on Wikipedia. In 1799, they didn't know any better. It's been 212 years since George Washington was poisoned. You would think that our FDA has had enough time to protect us from mercury's toxicity. Maybe our FDA needs to revisit the famous story of the cherry tree. You see, the moral of that story was that George Washington was an honorable child for admitting the truth. When will the FDA tell us the truth? In the early 1900s saw the creation of the American Medical Association, a doctors' union created to stamp out homeopathy. At the time, homeopaths were taking away too much business from the allopaths. Why do I bring this up? This disastrous union called the AMA, which works alongside the FDA, set into effect a system of profiting off of the sick. The AMA grew huge by making key alliances with business interests. The rise to power was mainly due to the money behind the drug and tobacco companies. 100 years ago, our government chose to put our health second to money and special interests. 150 is a number that is proudly stated on the FDA's website regarding mercury's long career in the dental profession. For over 150 years, amalgams have been placed into our mouths. Fact, 150 years ago, we had only 32 states and Lincoln was president. Fact, 150 years ago, the idea of communism was invented. Fact, 150 years ago, there was still slavery. We have put a man on the moon and have figured out how to split atoms. But you, Jeff, are still allowing this barbaric dental practice to exist. The world already knows the truths about the dangers of mercury. It's our First Amendment right to know the truth also. I would be so embarrassed to go to work knowing that I'm responsible for the slow poisoning of my own people, covering up the overwhelming evidence that exists, and preying upon the poor and uneducated. I would also be embarrassed to come home knowing that that's how I feed my family. Only a coward would choose money and politics over a human being's life. Have you heard about the latest car, stroller, or car seat to be recalled? Our government is quick to act when one of these could be defective. An immediate recall is announced in the hope of preventing deaths. Where was the immediate ban on amalgams? There's enough mercury in one large filling to sufficiently contaminate a 10-square-mile lake and restrict fishing. I would also like to know why you allow dentists to place dissimilar metals into our mouths. This is another barbaric dental practice that creates a battery effect. In my case, a gold filling is causing